was we had an agreement that she would never say anything about me and I would never say anything about her, because we knew, or we felt like, that
December 16th, 2000. Pre-dawn darkness blankets Lake Seminole. A boat sits empty on the cold water. No struggle, no footprints, no signs of life. For years, investigators and locals whispered the unthinkable. Those alligators had devoured Mike Williams, leaving no trace behind. By noon that day, his wife would make a call that sparked one of Florida's most haunting mysteries, a case that would remain unsolved for 17 long years. This is the story of a man who woke up on a Saturday morning to go duck hunting and never came home. But could a man really vanish without a trace in waters swarming with alligators? Or was something far darker at play? If you haven't subscribed to True Crime Wound yet, hit that subscription button now, so you'll always get notified when we uncover more shocking stories of betrayal, greed, and deadly secrets. Jerry Michael Williams, Mike to everyone who knew him, wasn't born into privilege. He grew up in Bradfordville, just north of Tallahassee, in a double-wide trailer. His father drove Greyhound buses. His mother ran a daycare. They could have built a house with their savings. Instead, they invested everything in their son's education. Mike and his older brother Nick worked night shifts at supermarkets to help pay for North Florida Christian High School. It was there that Mike excelled. Student council president, football player, key club member. The kind of young man teachers remembered long after graduation. It was also where he met Denise Merrill, and where he discovered duck hunting at age 15, a hobby that would, years later, become central to the story of his death. After high school, Mike attended Florida State University, majoring in political science and urban planning. Before he even graduated, Ketchum Appraisal Group hired him as a property appraiser. His boss would later describe him as the hardest working man I ever saw. Mike married Denise in 1994, a picture-perfect union that seemed straight out of a Southern love story. Denise wasn't just the girl next door. She was polished, charming, and deeply devoted. At least, that's what everyone thought. She and Mike were high school sweethearts, active in church, and admired in their Tallahassee community. Together, they built a comfortable life. But beneath that flawless image, cracks were quietly forming. And in those cracks stood someone very close to them. Mike's best friend, Brian Winchester, a man who had known them for years, who hunted with Mike and confided with Denise. What started as friendship soon crossed a line that no one could have imagined. And before long, that secret would set the stage for one of Florida's most chilling betrayals. By the time he turned 30, Mike was making $200,000 a year. The couple bought a home in a small upscale subdivision on the east side of Tallahassee. In 1999, their daughter was born. Co-workers said Mike was as devoted to her as he was to his work. Life seemed perfect. The Williamses did something ordinary, something thousands of families do. They bought life insurance, policies totaling nearly $1.75 million. The man who sold it to them was Brian Winchester, a life insurance agent, a childhood friend of Denise's, who had also become Mike's best friend. Brian Winchester. Remember that name. The year 2000 brought loss. Mike's father died. It shook him. In a moment of vulnerability, he told his mother he wished he could take the next year off. $50,000 would make that possible, he said. Just time to breathe. But Mike didn't slow down. 2 days before he disappeared, Mike and Denise told his mother and brother they were planning to have another child soon. They were planning a cruise to Hawaii that spring. Mike expected to travel to Jamaica for work. The future stretched out before them, full of promise. Saturday, December 16th, 2000. Mike Williams left his house on Centennial Oaks Circle well before dawn. Boat hitched to his truck. Shotguns secured. He was heading to Lake Seminole, a massive reservoir about 50 miles west of Tallahassee, where the Florida-Georgia border cuts through cold water and cypress trees. It was duck hunting season. Mike and Denise had planned that night, celebrating their 6th wedding anniversary in Apalachicola. He should have been back by mid-morning. At noon, Denise called her father. Mike hadn't returned. Brian Winchester's father, along with Brian himself, drove to the lake. They knew Mike's favorite hunting spots. They found his 1994 Ford Bronco parked near a remote boat launch in Jackson County on the Florida side. The truck was there. Mike was not. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission was called. A search began. Within hours, a storm rolled in and forced searchers off the water. When they returned, they found Mike's boat. It was floating roughly 225 feet from the launch ramp, adrift and empty. Inside, his shotgun, still in its case. Untouched. No sign of struggle. No blood. No Mike. The area where the truck was parked was known as Stump Field, a former orchard flooded when the Chattahoochee and Flint rivers were dammed. Jagged stumps jutted above and below the waterline, hazards for anyone navigating a boat. The initial theory seemed obvious. Mike had hit a stump, fallen out, and drowned. His waders would have filled with water, 8 to 12 feet deep. Cold. He would have sunk fast, unable to pull himself back up. Investigators told the Williams family his body would surface within 3 to 7 days. Maybe longer because of the cold front that moved in after that first night. 3 days passed, 7 days. 10 days into the search, a camouflage hunting hat was found, but it couldn't be connected to Mike. 2 weeks. Nothing. By early February 2001, the search was called off. In the history of Lake Seminole, many people had drowned, many bodies had been recovered. Mike Williams would have been the first to simply vanish. Why hadn't his body surfaced? A private search firm offered an explanation that would haunt the case for years. Alligators. With the wildlife around, I would guess that the alligators have dismembered and have stored the remains in a location that we would not be able to find, the searcher wrote in his report. The lake was full of alligators. Everyone knew that. Early searchers had seen many of them. Perhaps, investigators theorized, Mike's body had become entangled in the dense hydrilla beds beneath the lake surface. The alligators found him later. Turtles and catfish finished what they left behind. It was gruesome, but it made a certain kind of sense. Denise Williams, who had avoided the media during the search, accepted her husband's death. She arranged a memorial service the day after the search ended. Then, in June 2001, 6 months after Mike disappeared, an angler found something in the stump field area, a pair of waders. Divers were called. They recovered a lightweight hunting jacket and a flashlight from the lake bottom. Inside one of the jacket pockets was a hunting license with Mike's name and signature. But something was wrong. There were no teeth marks on the waders. None of the items showed signs of having been in the water for 6 months. No decomposition, no damage. For months after Mike vanished, the search dragged on, with no trace of him, no body, and no real answers. Most families would hold on to hope, waiting for that miracle call or clue. But Denise, she seemed ready to move on. Even though Florida law typically required 5 years before a missing person could be declared legally dead, Denise began pushing for it almost immediately. She argued that Mike's drowning was obvious, that there was no reason to wait. Her persistence paid off. Just 6 months after his disappearance, a judge granted her request, officially declaring Mike Williams dead. And exactly 1 week later, Denise collected more than $1.7 million from his life insurance policies. 5 years after Mike Williams vanished without a trace, something strange happened. Denise and Brian got married. But this wasn't a love that started after tragedy. It began before Mike ever went missing. While Mike was still alive, Denise and Brian were already entangled in a secret affair. They met in hidden places, whispered through phone calls, and lied to the people who trusted them most. They were both seen as devoted spouses, Denise to Mike, and Brian to his wife, Kathy. But Kathy knew something was wrong. By 2003, the cracks in Brian's double life were starting to show. His wife, Kathy Winchester, could sense something wasn't right. The late-night calls, the sudden trips, the way his eyes shifted whenever Denise's name came up. One night, Kathy confronted him, demanding the truth. And when the truth finally came out, it shattered everything. The confrontation tore their marriage apart. By 2003, the Winchesters' home was divided by betrayal, and their divorce was finalized not long after, around 2004. And with Kathy out of the picture, nothing stood in their way anymore. The secret affair that had started in the shadows could finally step into the light. In 2005, Denise and Brian got married, sealing a relationship built on lies, loss, and something far darker. The couple moved into the same house where Denise and Mike had lived. For most people, the case was closed, a tragic hunting accident. The lake had claimed another victim. But Mike's mother, Cheryl Williams, never believed it. Cheryl Williams couldn't let it go. Something wasn't right. She received threats, warnings to stop asking questions. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. She ran her own investigation while operating a daycare from her home. She took out ads in local newspapers, put up billboards, anything to keep her son's case alive. "I get criticized a lot for not admitting that Mike's dead," she told the Tallahassee Democrat in 2007. "All I know is I can't stop looking for him until I find him." Her persistence strained her relationship with Denise, but Cheryl pressed on. After years of lobbying, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement agreed to reopen the case. When investigators found Mike's Bronco parked near Lake Seminole, something didn't add up. The spot where his truck was discovered wasn't a proper boat ramp. It was just a rough, muddy patch of shoreline. But just a short distance away were well-built concrete launches that Mike used all the time. So the question was, why would an experienced hunter and boater like Mike choose the worst possible place to launch his boat? The night before Mike went missing, a storm rolled over Lake Seminole, bringing strong westerly winds. If Mike had fallen overboard and his boat drifted freely, those winds should have carried it toward the Georgia side of the lake. But when searchers found his boat that morning, it was still near the Florida shore, right where he'd launched it. That single detail made investigators wonder, was this really a tragic accident, or had someone staged the scene? When the boat was recovered, the engine was off, but the gas tank was full. According to the manufacturer, if the engine had been running when Mike fell out, as investigators theorized, it should have stayed on, circling until the fuel ran out. "Something sounds fishy on that deal," the manufacturer's representative said. And Mike didn't usually hunt alone. Why had he gone by himself that day? Then came the revelation that changed everything. Alligators don't feed during winter months. In December 2000, daytime temperatures at Lake Seminole averaged around 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Overnight lows dropped below freezing. Some nights hit 19 degrees. The water temperature was 58 degrees the day Mike disappeared, far too cold for alligators to be interested in food. "It is highly unlikely an alligator would have been active," said Matt Oresco, a local herpetologist. 58 degrees is too cold for an alligator to be interested in food at all. Even if an alligator had eaten Mike's 170-pound body, it would have left something behind. Bones, clothing, something. The complete disappearance of a full-grown man. "A stretch," said Oresco. "Very, very unusual." The waders raised more questions. They were undamaged. No tooth marks, no residue from 6 months underwater. When investigators filtered the water in them, they found no human remains. The hunting jacket and flashlight were in similar condition, far too pristine. The flashlight even worked when turned on. According to friends who hunted with Mike, he never put his waders on until he reached the spot where he planned to hunt. It was a common safety procedure, exactly to avoid the type of accident he allegedly died from. As much as he preached that to me, one friend said, why would he be wearing his waders while driving the boat? By 2006, investigators had reached a consensus. My gut feeling is Mike did not die in Lake Seminole, said one investigator. This is a suspicious missing person. But proving it was another matter entirely. The original search hadn't treated the scene as a crime scene. No evidence had been preserved. Mike's Bronco and boat had been returned to family. The lakeshore had been trampled by volunteers. The items recovered from the lake hadn't been retained properly. Without evidence or a body, there was no case. We're at a brick wall, pounding our heads against it, investigators admitted. Years passed. The FDLE closed its case in 2007, convinced the alligator theory was wrong but unable to move forward. By 2008, even insurance fraud investigators couldn't build a case, despite the suspicious circumstances. Cheryl Williams kept fighting. Starting on New Year's Day 2012, she began writing one letter every single day to Governor, asking him to reopen the investigation. She wrote over 200 letters. Not one received a response. When she inquired why, she discovered they'd been forwarded, unopened, to FDLE headquarters and placed in the case file. They could not have hurt me more if they had punched me in the face, she said. Then in 2012, everything began to shift. For a while, it seemed like Denise and Brian Winchester had everything they'd ever wanted. A beautiful home, financial stability, and the freedom to finally live out the relationship they once hid in secret. But behind closed doors, their marriage wasn't the happy ending it appeared to be. The lies that once brought them together were now slowly tearing them apart. Brian grew controlling, paranoid, and Denise began to fear the very man she'd helped protect for years. Reports later revealed that Brian struggled with sex addiction, a problem that created constant tension and mistrust between them. Their marriage, already built on secrecy and betrayal, began to crumble from the inside. By 2012, they were living separate lives. And in 2015, Denise finally filed for divorce, bringing an end to the marriage that had started with a deadly secret. But Brian opposed it. On August 5, 2016, Denise left her home to drive to work at Florida State University. While talking to her sister on the phone, she noticed someone climb over the back seat of her car. It was Brian. He took her phone, started yelling directions. When she didn't comply, he showed her a gun. She pulled into a CVS parking lot, close to the door. Brian said he was planning to kill himself. He didn't want the divorce. He assured her he didn't want to kill her. Denise calmed him down, drove him back to where he'd parked his truck. Before he left, he took a tan sheet, a plastic sheet, a spray bottle of bleach, and a tool from her car. Despite promising not to tell police, Denise drove straight to them. Brian Winchester was arrested and charged with kidnapping, domestic assault, and armed burglary. Cheryl Williams saw opportunity. Brian's not going to let Denise run around alone with all that money, she told the New York Daily News. I'm praying he'll tell us what actually happened. Facing up to life in prison, Brian knew the walls were closing in. And so, to save himself, he made a deal. Brian Winchester confessed. He told investigators that Mike Williams hadn't drowned that day on Lake Seminole. He revealed the horrifying truth, that he'd lured Mike out on a duck hunting trip, shot him, and buried his body nearby. All of it, he said, was part of a plan he and Denise had created together to collect the life insurance money and start a new life. Guided by Brian's confession, authorities searched the area around Lake Seminole. After 17 long years, They found human remains buried in a patch of dry mud. The remains were soon confirmed to be Mike Williams. For Mike's mother, Cheryl Williams, it was the moment she had fought for nearly 2 decades, proof that her son hadn't been taken by alligators, but by the people he trusted most. In December 2017, Brian Winchester was sentenced to 20 years in prison. On May 8, 2018, Denise Williams was arrested at Florida State University as she left work to celebrate her daughter's 19th birthday. A grand jury had indicted her on charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and accessory after the fact. The indictment revealed prosecutors believed Denise began conspiring with Winchester in March 2000, 9 months before Mike disappeared. At trial in December 2018, Brian Winchester took the stand. He confessed everything. He and Denise had never really ended their high school relationship, even after marrying other people. The affair started in 1997 and snowballed. They began planning Mike's murder so they could be together. Denise's family frowned on divorce for religious reasons. Murder seemed like the better option. They considered staging a boating accident in the Gulf of Mexico, throwing both Mike and Brian's wife, Kathy, overboard. But Brian didn't want to kill his children's mother. And he had an idea. On December 16, 2000, Brian lured Mike to Lake Seminole. Out on the water, he convinced Mike to put on his waders. Then he pushed him out of the boat. Mike managed to grab a tree stump. Brian fired a single shotgun blast to his face. Since the death could no longer be passed off as a boating accident, Brian buried the body, cleaned his truck, and went to a family Christmas party, where he learned a search was underway. He and Denise took it slow afterward. Let the insurance money earn interest. Avoided suspicion. They married 5 years later. The jury took 8 hours to convict Denise Williams of all charges. In February 2019, she was sentenced to life in prison. Cheryl Williams finally spoke at sentencing. "Justice has been served. Denise took not only my son, but also my granddaughter from me." In November 2020, Denise's murder conviction was overturned on appeal, but her conspiracy conviction was upheld, along with a 30-year sentence. Brian Winchester remains imprisoned at Madison Correctional Institution. As of 2025, Denise Williams is imprisoned at the Florida Women's Reception Center. Cheryl Williams spent 17 years fighting for her son, writing letters, putting up billboards, refusing to believe the lies. She was right all along. Mike Williams woke up on December 16, 2000, thinking he was going duck hunting with his best friend. Instead, he walked into a murder plot, orchestrated by the 2 people closest to him: his wife, his best friend, the people he trusted most. The lesson here isn't just about the capacity for evil that can hide behind familiar faces. It's about the price of betrayal, the way greed and desire can corrode everything they touch. Mike Williams was 31 years old when he died, a devoted father, a hard-working man who'd built a life from nothing. He deserved to watch his daughter grow up, to take that Hawaii cruise, to enjoy the future he'd worked so hard to build. Instead, his remains spent 17 years buried at the end of a dirt road, while the people who killed him collected his insurance money and moved into his house. But his mother never gave up. And in the end, justice, delayed, complicated, imperfect, finally arrived. You've been watching True Crime Wound, where love, trust, and ambition sometimes lead to deadly consequences. Stay tuned for more stories that cut deeper than the truth itself.